Good evening, everyone. This is Architecture, and welcome to the live stream. This episode is a little different from the typical format I've had. So, around the last stream that we had, I had talked about that I had acquired an original Pro Tools setup for an even older style of Pro Tools setup. And we're talking basically Mac New Bus here. So what I have is a 4-channel Pro Tools setup running on a Mac Quattro 700. Both of these things basically came out around 1991. This is just when Pro Tools was moving away from being sound tools. Change my view and you'll show you what we're working with here today. So on the big screen here is Opcode Studio Vision. Above us is the Akai S3200. And what you see on the very top here is the 442. This is our 4-channel in and out interface for the Mac Quattro 700. So basically what we're kind of experimenting with is basically working with one of the very first DAW setups that were basically kind of available to the general consumer, which, given the pricing of what this equipment cost, this was definitely not a casual endeavor for anybody. The software in the basic package itself was about $6,000, not including the $5,000 Mac Quattro 700 at this time. And I believe, I'm not sure how much the interface costs at this time, but it's basically, once you tally up the amount of storage that you needed, when hard drives were super expensive at this time, we're talking 300 to 600 megabytes being about $1,800 to $3,500. You're very quickly looking at a $15,000 to $20,000 setup from 1991 standards, being able to multi-track 4 channels at a time. Now, something to keep in mind too is that this machine, the antiquity of this machine, it can barely play an MP3. And we're basically multi-tracking 16-bit 44.1 kilohertz sound on this machine that can't even play a basic MP3. So when you put that into consideration, it's actually amazing that this even works. And so this is actually going to be the first time I've actually tried producing something with this. I basically was out of town for about 10 days and a few days ago got back into town, and even up until the time of this live stream was working out some of the bugs to make sure that everything was going to be running for us for the stream. So if there's anything that happens on this stream, I've done what I can in advance. Stayed up late last night, and also just before the stream was making sure that I've worked all the bugs out. Basically, I typically run on System 7. This is Mac OS 8. Mac OS 8 isn't exactly my favorite on the Quattro, just because it's a 68040 running at 25 megahertz. It really favors older System 7. So while this is a Pro Tools setup, I'm actually not using Pro Tools as a DAW in this instance. I'm basically just using it as a hardware package, because this was a couple years before going back to, this was before ASIO even existed. I mean, we're talking like this is one of the earliest standards of digital audio workstations. DigiDesign was kind of it. And before that was Sound Tools, which had a Mac and Atari ST option, but that was limited to two channels at a time. And so this was moving from 2 channels and moving into 4 channels, which can then be expanded to 16. And that's something I could explore, but not sure I really want to, just because I really don't need a 16-channel new bus setup for this. I already have a Pro Tools Mix TDM setup that definitely handles that duty a lot better and a lot easier than what this thing is able to handle. So if no one's familiar with what Studio Vision is, Studio Vision Pro was a DAW that Trent Reznor used extensively during the downward spiral era of production. basically what he would do is he would record a lot of the individual channels first into Opcode Studio Vision Pro, also bouncing sounds in between Akai samplers and Turbo Synth, both of which I have working on this machine. And as much as I'd like to showcase Turbo Synth, I have to admit there's a lot I don't know about it. I still am reading the manual on that, trying to get my head around what it can and can't do, which is basically a modular offline sampler synthesizer. Basically, you make a synth patch, render it into an audio file, and then it will basically, on your sampler of choice, whether it be an Akai sampler, an EMU, or in some cases a sample cell card, you could basically synthesize your own samples. And basically, this was kind of like an early software synthesizer. And one of the things that Trent Reznor would do is he would take basically all the sounds that he had sampled, whether it be guitars, drums, miscellaneous effects, and would basically process it with the wave shapers and all the different effects that you can achieve in Turbo Synth. It's a really cool program, really out there, very different. And there's really not a modern equivalent for it. It's something I would really like to see in a modern plugin format. But in the meantime, that's kind of a dream. And that was actually, if I was to say what was the initial thing that got me down into this rabbit hole 15 years ago, it would have to be Turbo Synth and its use on the downward spiral. And just basically how these Macs were used on that album, which was something I really looked up to from a production standpoint, and still to this day. And basically, what Charlie Clouser told me in a Reddit post, we had a small interchange, and I asked him, so what was Trent Reznor's workflow with this? Basically, said that they would do about 16 channels of audio in Studio Vision, and then they would dump that to 2-inch analog tape. And so when you would, and the reason they did that, for one, was they didn't trust digital media at the time, and who could blame them? Analog tape was a lot more reliable at this time than these finicky, SCSI hard drives at the time. And Charlie Clouser himself told me that their 600 megabyte drive set them back $3,500 around this time. And in this machine right here, we have about 8 gigs across 4 SCSI drives, because I prefer System 7, which has a limitation of 2 gigs per partition. So basically, I'm using the max that I can on a SCSI 2 SD in the system, while also occupying 4 out of 7 SCSI IDs. So you'll notice that I actually have a zip drive on this session today, and that is because my other SCSI 2 SD for my Akai samplers conflicts with some of the IDs that run in the Quattro 700. So I had to find a SCSI drive that basically resides on one SCSI ID and not have that conflict. In a way, we're all hooked up today, as the S3200 has XLR main outputs that feed into the 442, which will then be recorded into Opcode Studio Vision, but also sequenced. All the Midi sequencing will be done with Studio Vision today. So the first thing we got to do is we got to get some sounds into the Akai. And since we're running Mac OS 8, we're actually able to run Akai Mesa 2 on the Quattro 700. Just making sure that all my MIDI channels are talking to where they're supposed to. This is very experimental. I've actually not fully pulled this off with this setup yet, so this is very you're kind of experiencing this along with me in real time, kind of for the first time in a sense. I've been kind of putting all the pieces together, making sure everything works, but this is basically, I'm going live, and vastly underprepared and not sure if it's fully going to work. I've tested this in theory, and it should in theory work. We're going to find out if this actually works or not today on this live stream, being able to multi-track from the Akai into Opcode Studio Vision with this setup. In theory, this should all work the way it's supposed to, but anything can happen. We're basically using 35-year-old DAW technology here, and so anything can happen. So I'm going to quickly, did I say quickly? Nothing really quickly happens on Mac OS 8 on this machine. If this was System 7, it would just be flying, but this is super sluggish compared to System 7 for me. The other reason I'm using OS 8 is because I'm actually using Apple Talk to talk to my one of my OS 9 machines that has a much bigger sample library that I use for my samplers. So something about my S3200 is it's I recently got a new LED for it. As you can see, it's blistering bright, almost hard for this webcam to even pick it up. I mean, you can see this thing in any angle. It's super legible. Could basically do everything right off the display if I wanted to, but just for the sake of the live stream and just also it's just nice to be able to. I got a lot of moving new parts here that I've never really tried out like this. This is actually a very unfamiliar workflow. I'm new to Opcode Studio Vision. I'm new to this new bus era of porting. I'm hoping in theory this works the way I hope it does, but if not, you've been warned. I've been warned. This is very much an experimental stream today. So first thing we got to do is we need some breaks. And when you're on a 68K Mac, one of your options is going to be using Recycle 1.6, which was the latest version of Recycle you could run on a 68K Mac. And finding all the files I needed to run this was difficult enough on its own. Very happy I was able to find it through just people who been making jungle since the 90s, having these in their archives, because this would almost be impossible to find any other way. I do own a copy of Recycle 2.21. Good luck trying to find a 68K version of this for sale anywhere. I want to leave Apple Talk on, which is kind of a 50-50 yes, no when it comes to using Midi on these things, because it has a tendency to conflict, but I need that for the file share that I'm using right now. So you go to desktop, you see the OS 9 dock. That's QoS means Quicksilver, so I'm actually pulling from my G4 tower right now, which is infinitely more powerful for this application, but this is we're kind of experimenting with what the first audio MIDI kind of DOS setup would be like in 1991, which you've heard the price. It was basically 4 times the cost of an 8-app machine with half the amount of channels available. Understanding how expensive this setup was, it's very easy to see why many people would have had 3 to 4 8-app rigs before they even consider buying a Pro Tools rig at this time, just from the scale of economy here. Yes, it was on tape. It was kind of the worst of all worlds. It was tape and digital. Not like the good saturation tape kind of sound, but just like early digital on SVHS tape. And from what I've heard was kind of problematic with getting all your units to sync and play together. The 16-channel Pro Tools rig would have been a dream, but also much more expensive. it'd be many years later before that even became an affordable option. See if it plays. See what else I got here. I like that break. We're going to use that break. So this program is playing off the built-in sound of the Quattro 700, which is an 8-bit sound. So it's not the best previewing of the sound, but it be what it be in this case. There's actually a couple options I don't think I even have in 1.6, one of which being my favorite. Let's see. So this is a 2-bar loop. Yeah, because this is at a yeah. So what you're hearing from Recycle is not actually directly piped into this stream. I've not been able to figure out how to get Sound Manager to actually run through the DigiDesign interface yet. That's something I'll have to troubleshoot at some point. See, my typical workflow in this instance would basically be to add slices to grid, everything in a uniform, even chop, but I don't even think we have that option here. This is such a primitive version of Recycle that I'm not used to using these days. And the only reason I would even be using it is because we're on a 68K Mac directly connected to the sampler. I usually use a Power PC for this task, which can run Recycle 2, which is infinitely more useful in most of my workflow. This not being the most useful. And because I decided to be super experimental on this stream, I decided let's just really stir the pot here. Like let's go even further back than what I currently typically do. And I'm already starting to miss OS 9 immensely in some cases. Just not a lot of good options here on this display. I'm really trying to figure out what I would do here. I'd like to change this to measures. It's just in seconds right now, which really doesn't do much for me. It honestly would almost be easier to do this in the sampler right now. So typically what you would do is you would just drag up the sensitivity, you would detect your transients. So basically we're doing a transient chop here. If I had a way to designate this to be, what you call it? Beat measures. Would be able to whittle it down much nicer, but for the sake of brevity, we're just going to do it this way. So now we're just going to transmit this to the S3200. So we're going to definitely want that MIDI file and transmit. And also 1.6 has a limitation of where all the breaks are in mono. So that's another one of the limitations of 1.6. So we're going to not save that. Might regret that later, oh well. Now I'm going to find my copy of Studio Vision Pro again. Here it is. And now it's going to ask me, do I want to leave Apple Talk on? And yes, I want to leave it on. Not using it on the modem or printer port, so it won't be a problem for our MIDI serial interface, which is my Unitor 8 network. One of the cool things you can do with those Unitor 8s is even if you daisy chain them together, you can actually terminate your MIDI daisy chain. One could be USB. The other opposite end can be another serial cable. And so that's what I've done is at the end of my chain connects to my Quattro, and I'm able to, from the other direction, use my entire MIDI network in my studio from another computer in a separate connection. So this is going to be track 1. It's going to be on port 16. One of the things that, since we're directly piped into the 442 interface, we're going to need to be able to record monitor. So I have a pre-made file that I set aside for this. So I got my, you have to predetermine your record file in advance. And now we're going to import the MIDI sequence. Now I just got to find a way to change the tempo here. Here we go. So it's going to be 165 beats per minute. And we're going to import that MIDI file that we have on the desktop. All right, and then we're going to need that to be on 16.1. Go to our sampler. Change this to 1. Set. Select program. MIDI. Set the test program to 3, and the break is going to be set to 1. And now to see if we were successful. Moment of truth. It's working. So now we know that we got our sound working, we got our break in the sampler. Now we just need to load a few more elements, sampler, to get this track going somewhere. So first order of business, now that we have a break, just need a sub bass of some kind. So going to the sampler here. Yeah, it's not gonna like that. It doesn't have a floppy in it, but pull from the zip disk real quick. All right. Volume. I'm just gonna want cursor programs and samples here. Now we have a sub bass loaded. So next we'll need another channel here for the S3200. Always helps to name your track, so I'm going to quickly get around my cameras here and retitle. I got like two tripods, like literally in this spot here, kind of like in my way. So see if I can move some things around here, so that's a little better accessible. Okay, should be better. Yeah, this is a lot more comfortable now. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the S3200 non-XL and XL series. It's if I was to deal with anything in the 3K range, the 3200 has always been my pick. 3200 XLs for Mac and later versions of Windows, and the 3200 basically requires a Mac to have that SCSI interchange between the computer and sampler. So that's why the S3200 is paired with the older Macs, because it doesn't really work past OS 9.2. Now for the S3200 XL, you can actually use Windows 10 and 11 if you have the correct SCSI drivers installed, and use Recycle and Mesa that way. So that was actually one of the driving reasons why I bought the 3200 XL, even though I already had the original 3200. So if you're buying one and you want like the most amount of features available and basically have a wide range of access to use these more advanced features with these samplers, definitely get an XL model. Even a 3000 XL is a good bridge unit for that. And the S2000 also shares the same benefit. S2800, S3200, and the non-XL units are all old Mac based, and I suspect that could be because it seems like it requires a 16-bit SCSI bus, whereas the XL is 32-bit SCSI bus compatible. All right. Check our sub bass. Got to assign. If there's one thing I miss about the XL model is being able to just have a multi-file, which makes this whole process a lot simpler. You don't have to do this renumbering. This is the classic way that you would do it. It's mildly annoying when I'm used to the 3200 XL. All right, that should be pulling off of channel 2 here. Yeah, I'm still triggering 1. Let's see if this does it. There we go. Okay. All right. See if I got a loop here. There we go. Quickly commit this real quick. At some point, we'll add a pad to this. Make sure we save our progress here. See if I can run a Kai Mason in the background real quick as I do this. This part's a little bit of a gamble. All right. See if this works. All right. Success. while I'm thinking ahead, I'm going to just back up everything from the S3200 here. Here's the folder I was looking for. So now via SCSI, we're backing up everything from the sampler back into the Mac. So this actually bypasses my need for using the zip disk altogether. So it's directly saving in AIF format to the computer, so I can open these in any sample editor of choice, whether it be Sound Designer, Alchemy 3. All these sounds can be pulled up into those programs, manipulated. If you're using Sound Designer, you get the benefit of using Sound Designer plugins, which includes very ancient versions of waves. You're actually able to pre-treat a lot of your samples this way before sending it back to the sampler. It's a good way to kind of bake in some of your effects and EQs into your samples in advance. Make sure we get our sub bass saved, which is a much simpler program. Boom, and that's saved. Never have too many test programs saved. And just like that, it's done. Now I have a whole collection of Akai Mesa files on my other machine here, so I'm gonna see if I can pull those up. Go to import program, sample. We're gonna actually pull from the Quicksilver here, so now I'm pulling from another machine at this point. Let's try this one out. So from a whole nother Mac, we're pulling these samples directly via Ethernet and then via SCSI into the S3200. Which is kind of cool to think about, that we're pulling from networked Macs and moving files back and forth pretty much seamlessly this way. So go to set it to Midi channel 3. This program is now going to be 4. See what we get real. Nope. Try this. So this was the pad that was used on Contact. If any of you have heard that song, that's exactly where this is pulled from. Let's see, edit sample. Play with it in the track here, see what we get. Take this section, we'll extend it. Whoopsies. What did I just do? All right, I was able to recover that one. Had a moment there. All right, something else is screwed up now. Something else is screwed up now. Why? As far as sending samples on this stream, this is so experimental to me. I'm just trying to survive what I got here. Probably not tonight. Ugh. Kind of a rough loop at this point. It's one of the reasons I hate transient chops is when one of your transient chops gets screwed up, it just kind of screws everything up. So we're just going to lay a pad down. Then we're going to take what we got, record that to audio alongside the Midi. And we'll just kind of see how this all works. First, we got to record this pad. Yeah, find a charging cable real quick. Sorry, I had a camera dying. So really the next thing we got to figure out at this stage is how we add audio channels to this project. Sorry, I'm still trying to figure out how to get the actual recorded audio on the timeline here. All right. Yeah, we're in a little bit of a snag. I appreciate everyone's patience in this. This is basically what figuring this out has been like. Pretty much figuring out, like, am I doing this right? I have this set up correct. I got the MIDI part of this figured out. Now I'm just trying to get the audio part to commit. And that is not being very straightforward right now. Now, what if I just import audio real quick, if that is what will do it? Oh, look at that. I think we figured that. I can't believe that actually worked. I really cannot believe that worked. Okay, that was very counterintuitive. So you got to import audio. That really makes no sense to me. All right, that took a lot longer than I expected it to, but apparently what you do is you import the allocated record files that you have into the session, and then that enables you to add audio instruments into the project. No, did not know that, and now I do. So, sorry that took so long to figure out. This is the first time I've actually gone through with this. Now if I could just find a way to, so if I link it, okay. Okay, I think we got this figured out now. So track 2 should record in stereo. I've linked these together. Now let's see if this works. Moment of truth. It did not like that. It really did not like that. It recorded, but my disk speed isn't up to snuff for that. So let's try recording in mono. Maybe that'll make a difference. So it looks like if we record in mono, this works a lot better. Definitely kind of silly and goofy, but this whole premise is kind of silly and goofy if you think about it. No, it's definitely the hairiest audio tracking I've ever done in a DAW of any kind. See how this plays back. So there's a playback of what we recorded. Definitely got to spend more time getting this workflow dialed in. This is definitely the first time I've ever recorded onto the Mac Quadro 700 as a multi-track audio machine. Yes, this is opcode Vision 3.5, 68K, using the original Pro Tools NuBus card and a 442 interface. We just built a basic sequence, and now we're just listening to the playback result, which trying to record in stereo was disastrous, but recording in mono at a time worked a lot better. So this is what it's like to track audio on a 1991 Mac Quadro 700 using basically a SCSI 1 drive. Earlier in the stream, we were using Recycle 1.6. You'll see that on the playback. We also have Mesa 2 running in the background. And speaking of which, that reminds me I need to save some of my changes. Oh, sorry, I didn't see that screen there. Backing up that pad to the Mac hard drive. AK-sys does not work on 68K, so I do use it when I use the S5000, which I really haven't used in almost 2 years at this point. Just really haven't gotten around to it. Between the emus, I'm usually working on the emus at this point. And just to show everyone just how much RAM I'm working with 68 megs on this machine, which isn't a whole lot, but I just recently upgraded this from 20 to 68, and this allows me to run a lot more things in the background, which is really helpful when you're trying to run a DAW on a machine that is 35 years old. So I think for today we'll just cut the stream here. Stayed up late trying to figure out as much as I was able to stream today. Still got a lot more work to do when it comes to integrating the audio with the Midi end of things on this workflow. Thankfully, this isn't my only workflow. This was very experimental. This was like really kind of trying to push the limits of where the bottom of like the earliest DAW is. I mean, any earlier would be an Atari Falcon at this point, but I think even this is older than the Atari Falcon, possibly. Don't quote me on that. Would have to look that up. But thanks to everyone who showed up. Until next time. Hopefully, if I show this again, I'll have this a lot more dialed in for the next stream.